Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're tearing away all those sensationalized doomsday headlines to look at the actual data-driven impact that artificial intelligence is having on the global job market. We're going to explore what's really happening on the ground right now, what kinds of massive policies are being debated to handle the fallout, and most importantly, exactly how you need to prepare yourself. To kick things off, just take a look at this number. According to recent research from Boston Consulting Group, over the next 2 to 3 years, an absolutely staggering 50 to 55% of all U.S. jobs are going to be radically reshaped by AI. I really want to let that sink in for a second. We're talking about a timeline of just months, where more than half of the entire workforce will face completely new expectations for how they work and what they actually produce on a daily basis. And that brings us to the billion-dollar question, right? Will AI actually take your job, or is it just going to change it? Today, we're going to completely separate the myths from the reality. We'll look at the hard data on industry risk, we'll examine some huge macroeconomic policy proposals, and we'll break down the specific actionable steps you can take right now to adapt. Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, the AI job risk landscape. To really understand who is actually vulnerable, we're looking at data from the FAIR framework, which analyzed nearly 300 specific jobs across 26 different industries. And sitting at the absolute top of the vulnerability list, office and administrative support. It's facing a massive 90.2% displacement risk. And you might be wondering, why is that so high? Well, it's because these roles rely heavily on repetitive data processing and workflow management, which is exactly what AI systems handle with just incredible speed and accuracy. Just below that, you've got finance and accounting sitting at 84.2%. Interestingly enough, retail, marketing, and technology round out the top 5. It's kind of a paradox, really. The tech industry is literally building the very AI that's disrupting its own implementation and support roles. And this brilliantly illustrates the stark contrast in the modern workforce. On one side, you have these highly vulnerable office and admin sectors sitting at over a 90% risk. But jump over to the completely opposite end of the spectrum, and you'll find personal care and services sitting comfortably at just a 34.4% risk. Because think about it, no matter how ridiculously smart ChatGPT gets, there is no way it can cut your hair, spot you at the gym, or soothe a crying toddler. True human empathy and physical dexterity make this industry the absolute most resilient of them all. So, shifting gears a bit, let's look at Section 2, transformation, not total elimination. Now, seeing those high 90% numbers in top industries can definitely induce some panic, right? But we really need to shift our focus away from this idea of total job destruction. To understand your actual risk, you've got to understand a really vital concept called the gap. And the gap is simply the mathematical difference between an industry's displacement score and its replacement score. Honestly, grasping this single metric is absolutely key to surviving the AI revolution. So the crucial point is understanding the difference between these two specific terms. Displacement is basically the competitive pressure to adopt AI tools. If you don't adapt, you get displaced by someone who does. Replacement, on the other hand, is the probability of full outright job elimination by a machine. So for example, when you look at an industry like marketing, it has a super high displacement score of nearly 79%, but a replacement score of only 45%. That creates a massive gap of over 33 points. That tells us the industry is undergoing a really aggressive transformation, sure, but definitely not a total elimination. As the FAIR framework so perfectly concludes, a big gap means AI changes how you work, not whether you work. So if you're in a high-gap industry right now, your biggest competitive advantage is literally learning to pilot these AI tools before they completely rewrite your current methodology. Let's zoom out to the macro level now for Section 3, exploring universal basic income. But what about the folks in jobs where that gap is actually really small? The roles where outright elimination is a very real looming possibility. Well, a McKinsey report actually estimates that by 2030, anywhere from 400 million to 800 million jobs globally could be fully displaced by automation. And this massive potential reality brings us to a radical macroeconomic proposal that's getting a lot of traction: Universal Basic Income, or UBI. Basically, UBI guarantees all citizens a regular, unconditional cash payment, entirely regardless of their employment status or their personal wealth. It essentially attempts to decouple basic human survival from labor in an increasingly automated world. Now, on paper, there are some pretty strong theoretical arguments supporting this. Proponents argue that UBI serves as an absolutely essential economic buffer against mass technological unemployment. By guaranteeing everyone a baseline income, it theoretically simplifies massive, complex welfare bureaucracies down into one streamlined system. Plus, advocates suggest that actually giving people a basic standard of living could foster a far more dynamic economy. Without that constant underlying fear of losing your livelihood, people might be way more willing to take risks, innovate, dive into entrepreneurship, or even go back to school to adapt to all these new AI-driven industries. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the other side of the coin. We face some immense pragmatic hurdles here. The most obvious criticism, of course, is affordability. I mean, implementing UBI in a developed country like the United States would cost trillions of dollars annually, which raises some very serious questions about fiscal sustainability without leaning on massive tax hikes. On top of that, economists warn of high inflation risks, because if everyone suddenly has more disposable income, the demand for goods goes up, which could potentially drive prices up and completely erode the value of the UBI itself. Add in deep concerns about disincentivizing work, particularly for the less desirable jobs, and you're looking at massive political and social resistance.
All right, let's move out of theory and look at Section 4, the Kenya UBI experiment.
So instead of just debating academic theory all day, let's look at a major, real-world trial conducted by the nonprofit organization Give Directly in Kenya. And we are not talking about a small, isolated test here. This involves over 20,000 villagers in rural areas receiving regular, unconditional cash transfers for up to 12 whole years. It's truly one of the most significant efforts ever undertaken to see what actually happens to human behavior when basic needs are just unconditionally met. And honestly, the early results are fascinating. The data shows a really significant reduction in poverty levels and vastly improved economic security, which naturally reduces the huge amount of stress that comes with financial instability. But perhaps the most crucial finding here is what the recipients actually did with the money. Rather than just pure consumption, many used the UBI payments to invest in productive assets. We're talking about things like buying livestock and starting small businesses. It strongly suggests that unconditional cash can actually empower individuals to build assets and stimulate local entrepreneurship. Let's move to our final topic and see how this all builds into Section 5, Strategies for an AI Future. So we've talked about global industry risks and these massive macroeconomic policies, but governments are also exploring a whole toolkit of alternative responses to combat this AI skills mismatch. Because UBI is so wildly expensive and controversial, we're seeing proposals for targeted basic income, which means helping only the specific workers in industries displaced by automation. There are also ideas floating around for government-sponsored job guarantee programs, which would act as an employer of last resort. And of course, we're seeing a major push for massive retraining initiatives to equip workers for the jobs of tomorrow, as well as conditional cash transfers where getting financial support actually requires your participation in job training. The reality is, governments are likely going to need a hybrid of these approaches to maintain social stability. But listen, you absolutely cannot wait around for macroeconomic policy to save you. As the BCG research so clearly emphasizes, your workforce strategy cannot sit downstream of automation, you have to embed it right now. If you are in a high-risk industry, your window for adapting is shrinking incredibly fast. You need to take an AI career risk assessment right away to understand your specific role's profile. You have to actively learn how AI can augment your unique workflow to save you hours of administrative time. Deliberate, focused talent upskilling isn't a future goal, it is an immediate necessity. At the end of the day, the data is crystal clear. AI is going to radically reshape half of the workforce in just the next few short years. It's a massive transformation, and the individuals who actually thrive are going to be the ones who proactively learn to pilot these new tools. So I'm going to leave you with this final critical thought. The revolution is already here. How will you adapt your skills for the AI transition?